You're in my seat because he was black.
Your racism doesn't own this plane. We're all equal here, and your words just proved how small you are.
She took his seat because he was black. His next words silenced the plane. A perfectly manicured finger pointing inches from Daniel Okoye's face, the diamond ring catching the cabin light as Emily Dawson's voice cuts through the hushed first-class cabin. I don't know how you got that seat, but you need to move. Now. The scene establishes the high-stakes environment of Apex Global's premium first-class cabin, a sanctuary of privilege where leather seats cost more than most people's monthly rent and where assumptions about who belongs are made in seconds. The protagonist, Daniel Okoye, dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans with a worn backpack at his feet, displays a calm, deliberate composure that contrasts sharply with Emily Dawson's entitled aggression and the immediate, biased judgment that flashes across flight attendant Rachel Morrison's face the moment she sizes up the situation. The small leather notebook in Daniel's hand suggests this confrontation is not accidental, it's exactly what he came to find. Daniel Okoye stepped through the standard jetway at 6:47 a.m., deliberately bypassing the executive entrance that would have whisked him past security and directly to the aircraft door. Today, he was just another passenger, at least, that's what his black hoodie, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers were meant to convey. The backpack slung over his shoulder contained nothing that would identify him as the man who'd founded Apex Global Airlines 12 years ago, who'd fought his way up from a maintenance crew position to building an airline that now employed 14,000 people. He hung back at the gate, watching. A white couple in matching university sweatshirts and flip-flops breezed through pre-boarding with warm smiles from the gate agent. Behind them, a black family, father in a pressed suit, mother in elegant attire, 2 children impeccably dressed, faced a barrage of questions. Are you sure you're in the right boarding group? Can I see your passes again? You know this is first class, right? The father's jaw tightened, but he answered each question with practiced patience, a dance Daniel knew too well. He boarded when his group was called, nodding politely to the flight attendant who barely glanced at him before her attention shifted to the white businessman behind him. Welcome aboard, sir. Can I help you with your bag? Daniel found seat 2C, window side, first class, exactly as he'd requested when he'd booked the ticket under a slightly modified version of his name. He stowed his backpack, settled into the leather seat that his company had spent months perfecting, and pulled out a small leather notebook. The fountain pen clicked open with a satisfying sound. At the top of the page, he wrote the date, the flight number, and a single word, observations. The test had begun. He'd seen the data, complaint patterns, incident reports, the careful language passengers used when they reported feeling unwelcome or scrutinized. But data could be sanitized, massaged, explained away by executives eager to protect reputations. Daniel needed to see it himself. To feel it. He clicked his pen again and began to write. Rachel Morrison emerged from the galley with a practiced smile, champagne flutes balanced expertly on her tray. Daniel watched her work the cabin, cataloging every interaction with the clinical precision of someone who'd learned to notice what others missed. An older white man in cargo shorts and a rumpled polo shirt settled into 1A. Rachel appeared instantly. Good morning, sir. Champagne. Orange juice. We also have a lovely breakfast menu I can walk you through. The man took the champagne without looking up from his phone. She waited, smile unwavering, until he grunted his breakfast order. Daniel's pen moved across the page. 1A, immediate service, champagne offered unprompted, full menu presentation. A well-dressed black woman in a tailored navy blazer took seat 3A, arranging her laptop bag with quiet efficiency. Rachel passed her twice, once to deliver champagne to 4C, once to check an overhead bin. 10 minutes elapsed. The woman finally raised her hand slightly, and Rachel approached with a tight smile. Yes. May I have some water, please? Of course. I'll see what we have. Daniel's pen scratched softly. 3A, 10-minute wait for acknowledgement. Request treated as imposition. No proactive service. A South Asian man in 5B asked politely for a blanket as Rachel passed. We'll see what we have available, she replied, not breaking stride. 30 seconds later, she handed a blanket to the white woman in 6A who hadn't asked for anything. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his expression remained neutral. His pen kept moving, documenting the quiet architecture of bias, the kind that cowl. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his expression remained neutral. His pen kept moving, documenting the quiet architecture of bias, the kind that could be dismissed as coincidence if you saw it once, but revealed itself as system when you watched long enough. Rachel approached his row. She glanced at him, hoodie, jeans, the backpack visible under the seat, and her smile flickered. "Can I get you anything?" The words were correct, but the tone carried a different question. Should you be here? "Water, please," Daniel said evenly. "Sure." She moved on without offering champagne, without mentioning the menu, without the warmth she'd shown the cargo shorts passenger in 1A. Daniel added another line to his notebook. Then he looked up and saw her coming down the aisle again, and behind her, a woman with platinum blonde hair, designer clothes, and a Louis Vuitton bag clutched in her manicured hand. Emily Dawson had arrived. Emily Dawson swept into the first-class cabin like she owned it, her voice preceding her arrival. "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Do you know how much traffic I sat in?" And then they changed the gate. She juggled her designer handbag, carry-on, and phone, her frustration radiating outward in waves that made other passengers glance up and then quickly away. She stopped mid-aisle, checking her phone against her boarding pass, her lips moving as she read. Then her eyes traveled to the seat numbers, landing on 2C. Landing on Daniel. For a moment, she simply stared, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder. Disbelief. Disgust. As if the sight of him in that seat violated some unspoken rule of the universe. Daniel met her gaze calmly, his notebook resting on his lap. He'd seen that look before, had documented 17 variations of it in the past 20 minutes alone. Emily marched over, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She didn't greet him, didn't excuse herself. She simply tapped his shoulder with 2 fingers, sharp enough to demand attention. "Excuse me." The words were clipped, dripping with the kind of entitlement that came from a lifetime of being accommodated. "That's my seat." Daniel looked up, his expression neutral. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't know how you got that seat," Emily interrupted, her voice rising just enough for the passengers around them to hear, "but you need to move. Now." Several heads turned. A businessman across the aisle paused mid-email. The woman in 3A looked up from her laptop, her eyes widening slightly. Daniel reached into his pocket with deliberate calm and produced his boarding pass, holding it up so she could see it clearly. "This is seat 2C. It's assigned to me." Emily snatched the boarding pass from his hand, examining it with the intensity of a customs agent checking a suspicious passport. Her frown deepened. She turned it over, checked it again, then thrust it back at him. "There's been a mistake." She said it with absolute certainty, as if reality itself had malfunctioned. "This is my seat." Daniel took the boarding pass back, his voice steady. "Perhaps you should check your own ticket." Emily's face flushed. "I don't need to check anything. I always sit in first class. I'm elite platinum." She said it like a title, like royalty. "Then I'm sure your seat is here somewhere," Daniel replied. "But it isn't this one." Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Then she did what Daniel had predicted she would do from the moment she'd looked at him with that expression. She raised her voice. "Flight attendant. Flight attendant." Rachel Morrison appeared within seconds, her professional smile already in place, ready to smooth over whatever disruption threatened her on-time departure. "Is everything all right here?" Emily turned to her, and Daniel watched the subtle shift in her body language, from aggression to victimhood in the span of a breath. "This man," she said, pointing at Daniel without looking at him, making him an object rather than a person, "is in my seat. I need you to fix this immediately." Rachel's eyes moved from Emily, designer suit, expensive bag, the unmistakable bearing of someone used to being accommodated, to Daniel. Her gaze lingered on his hoodie, traveled down to his jeans, registered the worn backpack tucked under the seat. Daniel watched her expression change, saw the assumption form in real time. "Sir," Rachel said, her voice taking on a different quality, firmer, less warm, "may I see your boarding pass?" Daniel handed it to her. Rachel glanced at it, but her eyes didn't focus the way they should have when actually reading something. She looked at it the way you look at a document you've already decided doesn't matter. "Sir, let me check on this." She turned to Emily with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry for the confusion, ma'am. Give me just one moment." Emily crossed her arms, a small smirk playing at her lips. Victory. She'd seen this before, knew how it would end. People like her always won these battles. Rachel disappeared toward the front galley. Daniel remained seated, his notebook open on his lap. He wrote, 412, crew sided with passenger based on appearance, no verification performed. Rachel returned 90 seconds later with James Chen, the senior purser, a slim man in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful demeanor of someone who'd learned to navigate corporate hierarchies. James approached with his hands clasped in front of him, his smile professional but strained. "Good morning, sir," James said, his voice gentle in the way people use with children or those they believe might not understand. "I understand there's some confusion about your seat assignment." "No confusion," Daniel said evenly. "This is my assigned seat. 2C. James glanced at the boarding pass Rachel held, but like her, he didn't really study it. "I see. Sir, is it possible you might have read the seat number incorrectly? Sometimes passengers mistake the letters." "I didn't misread it." Of course, of course." James's smile tightened. "But perhaps we could just double-check. Just to be absolutely certain." Emily's voice cut in. "I don't have time for this. I have a connection in Chicago." James turned to her, his voice immediately softening. "Of course, ma'am. We'll have this sorted out right away." He looked back at Daniel. "Sir, if you could just check your digital manifest," Daniel said quietly. "It will show you exactly who is assigned to this seat." James hesitated. For a moment, Daniel thought he might actually do it. But then Emily huffed, the businessman in the aisle seat was clearly getting impatient, and the easy path presented itself to James with crystal clarity. "Sir, I'm sure we can find you another excellent seat. I'm not moving." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. The temperature in the cabin shifted. What had been an inconvenient delay became something else, a confrontation that passengers couldn't ignore. Daniel felt eyes on him from every direction, felt the weight of judgment and curiosity and that particular discomfort white people feel when race becomes visible in a space where it's supposed to remain invisible. "Sir," James said, his gentle tone fraying at the edges, "I'm trying to help resolve this situation." "Then check the manifest," Daniel repeated. He reached into his pocket and placed his passport on the tray table beside his boarding pass. "My name is on both documents. The seat assignment is clear. All you have to do is verify it." Emily's voice rose, sharp and incredulous. "Are you serious right now? You probably stole that boarding pass. Or used points you didn't earn. I've heard about people gaming the system." Daniel turned to look at her directly for the first time. "I paid for this seat. It was assigned to me. The documentation is here. What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Emily said, though her tone said otherwise. "I'm simply saying that I am an elite platinum member. I have been flying this airline for 7 years. I always sit in first class, and I know for a fact that this is my seat." "Then show me your boarding pass," Daniel said calmly. Emily clutched her phone tighter. "I don't need to show you anything." Around them, other passengers began pulling out their phones. Daniel saw the distinctive lift of arms, the slight tilt of screens. Recording. He predicted this too, the digital audience that would bear witness, that would make this moment impossible to disappear into corporate euphemisms and quiet settlements. James Chen noticed the phones too, and Daniel watched him calculate. A man being wrong was a minor inconvenience. A viral video was a crisis. "Sir," James said, his voice hardening slightly, "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside so we can resolve this at the gate. We're already behind schedule, and I can't delay this flight over a seating dispute." "I'm not disputing my seat," Daniel said. "You haven't verified it. You haven't checked your system. You've made an assumption based on how I look, and you're asking me to accept that assumption rather than follow your own protocol." James's jaw tightened. Emily made an exasperated sound. "This is ridiculous. Are you going to do something or not?" James looked at Emily, at the phone's recording, at the schedule he was responsible for maintaining. Then he looked at Daniel, hoodie, jeans, backpack, a man who didn't look like he belonged, and made his choice. "I'm calling security." Daniel nodded slowly, unsurprised. He picked up his pen. "I'm sure that won't be necessary if you just—" "The decision is made, sir." Daniel resumed writing in his notebook, his hands steady. "Then I'll wait right here." Emily's performance reached its crescendo as James moved toward the galley phone. "Finally. Thank you. I cannot believe I had to deal with this." She looked around at the other passengers, seeking validation, finding mostly averted eyes and uncomfortable silence. But not complete silence. A young white woman in 4B, phone raised and clearly recording, said quietly, "This doesn't seem right." Emily whirled on her. "Excuse me. He has a boarding pass. He has a passport. Why aren't they just checking the computer?" "Because I know this is my seat," Emily snapped. "I don't need a computer to tell me what I already know." The woman in 4B shook her head slightly but said nothing more. Her phone stayed up. James returned, his face composed into professional neutrality. "Security will be here shortly. Sir, I'm going to need you to remain calm and cooperative when they arrive." Daniel looked up from his notebook. "I've been nothing but calm and cooperative. I'm sitting in my assigned seat with valid documentation. What part of that requires security?" James didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew what was happening here, what had always been happening in spaces like this. It was the same dance Daniel had watched at the gate, the same pattern Rachel had displayed in her service, the quiet architecture of who belonged and who didn't, who was trusted and who was suspected. The minutes stretched. Daniel continued writing, documenting every statement, every expression, every choice made by the crew. Emily checked her phone repeatedly, huffing with increasing volume about her connection time. Rachel busied herself in the galley, avoiding eye contact with the entire situation. A passenger 2 rows back whispered to his companion, "This is wrong." But he didn't say it loud enough for the crew to hear. He didn't stand. He didn't object. The whisper was as far as his conscience would carry him. The cabin settled into an uncomfortable tension, a held breath. First-class passengers who had paid premium prices to avoid exactly this kind of disruption now found themselves trapped in a drama they couldn't escape, forced to witness something they'd probably prefer to ignore. Daniel caught the eye of the woman in 3A, the one who'd been ignored for 10 minutes before getting water. She met his gaze and gave him the smallest nod. She knew. She'd been here before, in different forms, in different spaces. They all had. The aircraft door opened. Heavy footsteps echoed through the jetway. Security had arrived. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the first-class cabin, their presence immediately filling the space with an air of authority that made passengers sit up straighter, made the situation irreversibly real. Officer Michaels came first, late 50s, thick around the middle, with the bearing of someone who'd been doing this job long enough to have seen everything and believed most of it. Behind him came Officer Chen, younger, Asian American, his eyes taking in the scene with visible uncertainty. Emily immediately stepped forward. "Thank God you're here. This man refuses to leave my seat. I've been trying to be reasonable, but he won't listen." Officer Michaels looked at Emily, designer clothes, expensive bag, the confidence of someone used to being believed, and then at Daniel. The calculation was instant and familiar. "Sir," Michaels said, his voice carrying the weight of assumed authority, "I'm going to need you to come with us to sort this out at the gate." Daniel remained seated, his voice calm. "Officer, have you verified the seating manifest?" "Sir, we're not going to debate this here. It's a simple question. Have you checked which passenger is assigned to this seat?" Michaels's face hardened. "Sir, the flight crew has informed us there's a dispute. We're here to resolve it peacefully. Now, I'm asking you nicely to come with us. And I'm asking you to do your job," Daniel said quietly. "Check the manifest. Verify who is actually assigned to seat 2C. It will take you 30 seconds. Officer Chen shifted behind his partner, his discomfort visible. "Mike, maybe we should." "We can't delay the flight over a seating dispute," Michaels interrupted. "We'll sort it out at the gate." He looked at Daniel, his tone sharpening. "Sir, you can either come with us voluntarily, or we can make this a federal incident. Your choice." The phrase landed like a threat. Federal incident meant charges, arrest records, the kind of consequences that could follow a person for years. Daniel had seen this tactic before, had documented it in reports, had heard it in complaints. It was the ultimate pressure point: comply or face criminalization. Around them, phones rose higher. The recording lights glowed like tiny red eyes, bearing witness. Daniel closed his notebook carefully, tucked his pen into his pocket. He stood slowly, deliberately, gathering his backpack and slinging it over his shoulder. His movements were controlled, giving them no excuse to escalate, no reason to call his behavior threatening. "I'll come with you," he said quietly. "But for the record, none of you verified the manifest. None of you followed protocol. You made a choice based on how I look." Michaels gestured toward the aisle. "Let's go, sir." Daniel stepped into the aisle. The walk toward the exit stretched before him, past rows of passengers who would remember this moment, past faces that registered shock, discomfort, relief that it wasn't them. Past the crew who had made this happen. He took 3 steps. 4. 5. Halfway down the aisle, Daniel stopped walking. The cabin fell silent. Officer Michaels turned, confused. "Sir, keep moving." Daniel didn't move. Instead, he turned slowly to face the passengers, the cameras, the entire scene that had played out over the past 30 minutes. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried to every corner of the cabin. "My name is Daniel Okoye." Somewhere in the back rows, someone gasped. "I am the founder and majority owner of Apex Global Airlines." Emily's face went slack. Rachel Morrison's hand flew to her mouth. James Chen's expression crumbled into horror. "This flight. This plane. This company, I built it." Daniel's eyes moved across the passengers, meeting the cameras directly. "I started in maintenance, worked my way up, and created this airline because I believed we could do better than the industry standard. Better service. Better treatment. Better humanity." The phone stayed up, capturing every word. "What you've just witnessed is exactly what I came to find. No one checked the manifest. No one verified the facts. They saw a black man in a hoodie and jeans and decided he couldn't possibly belong in first class. They chose to believe assumptions over documentation. They chose to call security rather than spend 30 seconds checking their system." Emily tried to speak, but no sound came out. "This isn't about one seat. It's about every black passenger who's been doubted, questioned, and removed based on nothing but appearance. It's about every person of color who's had to prove they belong in spaces they've paid for, earned, or built themselves. It's about a woman in 3A who waited 10 minutes for water while passengers who looked different were served immediately. It's about a system that fails the moment we stop watching it. Daniel's voice remained steady, but it carried weight now, the weight of authority, of ownership, of a man who'd seen enough. I didn't create this airline to replicate the discrimination I faced climbing through this industry. I created it to be different. He paused, letting the silence stretch. And today, that changes. Today, we begin making that real. The cabin erupted. Gasps. Whispered exclamations. The businessman in the aisle seat dropped his phone. Emily's face drained of all color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Rachel Morrison looked like she might be sick. James Chen backed away slowly, as if distance might somehow undo what had happened. Officer Michaels lowered his radio, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Officer Chen just stared, wide-eyed. Daniel turned to the officers. "Gentlemen, if you'll check the manifest now, you'll find that seat 2C is registered to D. Okoye, a booking made 3 weeks ago, paid in full. You'll also find that Ms. Dawson's actual seat assignment was 24B, main cabin, with a complimentary upgrade to Economy Plus. Not first class. Never first class." Emily found her voice, high and desperate. "That's not, there was an email," the system said. "The system," Daniel said quietly, "shows exactly what you paid for." Within minutes, the video began its viral journey. Passenger accounts uploaded to Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Hashtag Apex CEO trended within 15 minutes. Hashtag Seatgate followed immediately after. The footage was everywhere, Emily's pointed finger, Rachel's assumptions, James's choice, and Daniel's devastating revelation. They'd escorted Daniel off the plane, but the plane itself couldn't take off now. Gate supervisors appeared. Then managers. Then Sandra Mills, regional vice president, her heels clicking frantically as she rushed through the terminal. "Mr. Okoye," she breathed, her face pale. "Please, let's handle this internally." "We can." "No." Daniel's voice was quiet but absolute. "No quiet settlements. No internal resolutions. This happened in public because it happens everywhere, every day, in private. If we handle this quietly, nothing changes." Within the hour, Daniel stood before a hastily assembled press conference in the terminal, cameras from every major news outlet pointed at him. Behind him, his legal team. Beside him, statements prepared by his communications director. Effective immediately, Daniel began, Apex Global Airlines will implement mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing employees. We will conduct a third-party audit of every discrimination complaint filed in the past 5 years. We will establish a passenger bill of rights that prioritizes documentation over assumptions and dignity over convenience. He paused, looking directly at the cameras. Rachel Morrison and James Chen have been terminated for violation of company protocol. Emily Dawson faces a civil lawsuit and a lifetime ban from Apex Global Airlines. But this isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. The questions came fast, but Daniel had one more thing to say. "I didn't build this airline to replicate the discrimination I faced. I built it to be different." Today, we begin making that real. The video would be watched millions of times. The hashtags would trend for days. But in his office that night, Daniel pulled out his leather notebook and wrote one final line. "Test complete. Now the real work begins."